Hey guys, in this video, we're gonna be talking about a new 3D printing software called Cloud 3D Print. Now this video is not intended to be a direct head-to-head comparison between Octoprint and Cloud 3D Print, but I wanna use Octoprint as a reference to explain to you guys what Cloud 3D Print is all about. Now I've been using Octoprint for a number of years now, and although I generally still really like it, I find that if you want advanced functions out of Octoprint, you have to rely on third-party applications and plugins to get that. Now, this is part of Octoprint's open source nature, which I think is one of its greatest strengths, but I also think it can be one of its greatest weaknesses as well. Now, the reason I say that is that it's hard to keep up with all of the development of what's happening with Octoprint and those plugins and applications, and so you may not even know that the application exists or that it's being developed. It may be hard to find. It might be just too much of a hassle to install to do that additional setup on it. And then there's also the issue of future compatibility. If the developer loses interest in the project and future versions of Octoprint may not be compatible with those older plugins, and then you lose that functionality in the end. And so sometimes it's nice just to have everything built in all in one package. And that's where something like Cloud 3D Print comes into play. So it's not open source software, and it is developed by a company called Mech Solutions, but the advantage here is the convenience factor. And so everything gets delivered to you in one package. It's very easy to flash onto your Raspberry Pi. You can have multiple instances of it running across your different printers, and it can be all managed in one place under one dashboard. Now, the name also suggests that it's cloud-based, and so all of your files and projects are stored on the cloud, which acts as a separate layer of, let's say, security or backup. Because of course, people like me who go too long between backups run the risk of losing some of their files if their computer crashes and that sort of thing. So it's nice to have some sort of cloud-based backup for all of your STLs as well as your G-code files, etc. Now, this also gains you remote access to your printers and these files from anywhere in the world, whereas something like Octoprint runs locally on your home network. And if you want to gain remote access to Octoprint, you have to do some additional setup. Again, Cloud 3D Print, this is all just done right out of the box, all in one place, in one easy setup. It has built-in slicers. It has also a AI print failure detection mode, so you can set up a webcam on your Raspberry Pi, and it has that AI detection to detect a failed print and send you alerts, and you can abort the print and start a new one. And so we're gonna get into all of these features, and I'm gonna go through sort of the fundamentals of Cloud 3D Print, how to sign up for an account, how to set it up, and again, start some prints, upload files, all of that sort of thing. So let's get started.
And so the first thing you need to do is head on over to cloud3dprint.com, and you'll be presented with this website, which goes over all of the main features of this software. And at the time of the making of this video, they got things like AI-powered print failure detection, cloud-based project management, which is really handy, and of course, real-time control and monitoring of your print job. There's a whole bunch of other things you can check out, but of course, that's just the basics. So head right back on up to the top of the screen, and you're going to want to sign up for a new account. And there's nothing particularly special about this process, just sign up like you would on any other website. And once you get your login credentials, you can sign into your account and you are on your new Cloud 3D Print dashboard. On the left-hand side, you can see all the different places you can navigate to, and we're going to start with our setup wizard because we are going to need to flash a new image onto our Raspberry Pi, and this is the device that we are going to be connecting to the 3D printer itself. They have a really easy to follow walkthrough guide that's going to allow you to set up your Raspberry Pi, and if you've never done this before, it's very easy, and they have all of the details in one spot, which is very convenient. If you're coming from the Octoprint world, this is a very similar process, and you can just download that image, and you're going to be using the Raspberry Pi imager to flash that new image onto your Raspberry Pi. All of the Raspberry Pi imager settings are right there in this infographic here on the screen that you'll find inside of your Cloud 3D Print dashboard, and you can follow everything exactly as it's presented to you on this dashboard, and you'll successfully set up your Raspberry Pi. Now, I've already done this in the past, and I've been using Cloud 3D Print now for a few months, but I'm going to start a fresh new Raspberry Pi session just to show you guys how easy it is to set up. And so my download is now complete, and I'm going to go ahead and open the Raspberry Pi imager, and we're going to do a fresh install. And so the first thing you do is just choose the operating system you want, and this is going to be that custom image that you downloaded. And so you're going to have to unzip that file, find it, and then you're going to choose your storage device, which should be a SD card that you've inserted into your computer. It should be blank and completely formatted to a fresh SD card. And again, following the setup wizard, you're going to go through all of these advanced option settings, setting up a password and username for your Pi, setting up all of your wireless configuration settings for your home wireless network so that the Raspberry Pi can connect to that network, and then you can access it from your Cloud 3D Print dashboard. This includes all of your country settings and the Wi-Fi SSID, and again, the password. So just walk through all of these things, super easy to set up. Once you're done, press save, then just simply hit write, and this is going to start the imaging process for that SD card. This will take a few minutes, just watch the progress bar, and after a few minutes, you'll be presented with a prompt that tells you the process is complete. Now you can press continue, you can close the Raspberry Pi imager, hit next in your Cloud 3D Print dashboard, and you'll see now that you can power up your Raspberry Pi with, of course, that new SD card inserted into the Raspberry Pi, and you're going to want to connect a USB cord from your Raspberry Pi to your 3D printer. Make sure your 3D printer is also switched on at this point. Hit next on the setup wizard, and here you're going to enter the host name of the Raspberry Pi that you configured, so that was in those configuration settings, or alternatively, you can use the IP address of the Raspberry Pi if you know the IP address. I've got a bunch of Raspberry Pis on my home network, and so I am going to be using the IP address, and I'm going to hit go to control panel. This is going to send you to the control panel for this particular Raspberry Pi that you set up with this particular instance of Cloud 3D Print. Now I'll explain a little bit more later in the video how that works and how this is different from the dashboard. But when you're here, you can now add a new 3D printer, and this is going to be the printer that you have physically connected by USB cable to this Raspberry Pi. I'm going to be using an Ender 7 as an example. And so you can just name it whatever you want, and then you can of course select the pre-configured Ender 7 3D printer profile. And as you can see, as I was scrolling through that list, there are a lot of supported 3D printers, so you should be able to find yours. Then you can just hit connect, you can select the port, and you can either select auto, or if you know the baud rate of your printer, and for most Creality printers it's that 115200, and you can just press connect, and it should successfully connect to your printer if everything was set up correctly. Now you can go ahead and close the tab associated with the control panel, and of course the tab that was previously open for the dashboard is still there with your setup wizard. On the left hand side you can click dashboard, and now you should see the Ender 7 or whatever printer you selected in your dashboard. Clicking on that printer will bring you over to the Raspberry Pi monitor where you can see your webcam that you have connected to the Raspberry Pi. I'm going to go ahead and hit edit Raspberry Pi in the control panel. I'm going to go back to the control panel because I'm going to show you guys how to set up a custom printer. So if your printer is not on that list, or if you do have a printer like I do, like this Ender 7 that I've modified, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect from it. I'm going to delete that profile, and then I'm going to go back to my dashboard tab. On the left hand side you'll see 3D printer profile. I'm going to add a new 3D printer profile. I'm going to select the brand as Creality. I'm going to find my Ender 7, and then I'm going to go through these settings, and I'm more or less going to either write them down, copy them, or in this case take the gcode settings, so the start and end gcode settings, and I copy those over to a notepad file just because I want to have these settings exactly as they were in Cloud 3D Print, and I'm going to be applying them to a custom profile, which is essentially just going to be a modified Ender 7 profile in Cloud 3D Print. Once you have the start and end G-code copied over to a notepad, you can then scroll down and hit add customized 3D printer, and this is where you can build out a totally custom profile. You can even add a custom logo, and in this case, I'm going to be putting my Embrace Making logo on there. I'm going to call this printer Dragon Rising, as this is the nickname for that Ender 7 project I've been working on. And I'm going to be putting the brand name as Creality, since it is still a Creality printer. In here, you can set up all the physical properties of the printer, so your XYZ build volume. My Z height is going to be slightly modified because of some of the modifications that I did to this printer. You can change your max nozzle temperature, all that great stuff. The origin position of the printer, in my case, I want it to be the bottom left-hand corner of the print bed. The print head settings are more or less the same settings that you'd find in Cura. And so these are the physical dimensions of your print head, and this is for sequential printing. And so I'm just going to put in some sort of random settings in here, as I don't do sequential printing. If this is something that you do, you would want those to be accurate, as you wouldn't want your print head contacting the prints that have already been completed. Over in the start and end G-code settings, you can copy over the start and end G-codes from the notepad file that you set up from the previous Ender 7 profile. And if you do have a truly absolutely custom 3D printer, you can of course just enter your own custom start and end G-code. With all of that complete, you just hit save, and now you have a custom 3D printer profile loaded into Cloud 3D Print. Now, if you recall, I had deleted the generic Ender 7 profile that was connected to the Raspberry Pi. And so if I click on Raspberry Pi Monitor, you'll see that there is no 3D printer currently connected to that Raspberry Pi. So you'll see no printer data. And I'm going to have to go back to the control panel for that Raspberry Pi and connect the new printer profile. And so another way of getting there is going back through the setup wizard, typing in the IP address of the Raspberry Pi that I want to connect to, hit go to control panel, and that's going to open up this tab again where I can now select add a new 3D printer. In the drop down menu for 3D printer model, you'll see my Dragon Rising, and I'm going to nickname it the same thing, Dragon Rising, and hit confirm. Now you'll see it pop up there, and it's going to be the same process of just hitting connect, selecting the port, selecting the baud rate, and then hitting connect. And again, if you've done everything right and your printer is on, it should connect to that printer successfully. Now that I'm done with the control panel, I can close that tab. I'm back in the generic dashboard area. You'll still see that it says no printer data, and that's just because it has to be refreshed. But if I go to the dashboard, I can see my custom Dragon Rising printer, click on that, and now I get that refreshed Raspberry Pi Monitor page, and you'll see my custom 3D printer connected. And now on the right hand side of the screen, I can click on print a file. Now I have not yet uploaded any files, and I have not yet created any projects. So you'll see that all of this is blank. Now you can go ahead and press add a project from there, or on the left hand side of the screen, we can head over to the projects tab and we can add a new project. Now this is one of the features that I really like about Cloud 3D Print over Octoprint. And so on Octoprint, what you would do is you would set up each instance of Octoprint, and you would be adding files to that particular Raspberry Pi. Whereas in Cloud 3D Print, you have a centralized location where you can organize all of your projects, all of those 3D printed files, and you can share them across each instance of Cloud 3D Print on all of your Raspberry Pis in one centralized location. And so you're not necessarily tied into a particular Raspberry Pi and housing all of those files on there. You're housing them on the cloud, and again, you're having them all in one centralized location where you can add things like groups and titles and categories and deadlines and tags and all of those great things to keep all of your projects organized. This is extremely useful even as an individual user, but even more so if you're running something like a 3D printing service and you have employees or you have colleagues or somebody else who's accessing these projects in these files, and you can set up different group settings and administrator rights, etc. So it's a fantastic way to keep yourself organized or keep your business organized. You can upload a file to the project immediately, or you can just fill out the information and then hit Save Project. This will bring me into the project file, and you'll see that I only have one project, and that's called Wheel Tool. That's the one that I just created. And so here I can upload models, G-code files, I can see completed prints, and there's even an album section where I can see still screenshots from the webcam or even time lapses that I've created and associated with this project. For this project, I already have G-code files that I had pre-sliced using Prusa Slicer, and so I'll show you how I'm adding one of those. And in the G-code section, I'll just hit add a G-code file. I'll find it on my computer. I can associate it with that Dragon Rising Ender 7 printer, and then I can just go ahead and upload that file. So now it's located in the G-code folder within the Wheel Tool project. Now, if I want to print this file, I can hit print on the right-hand side and do it that way, or I can go back to my Raspberry Pi monitor. I can see that I have my Dragon Rising printer connected. I can hit print a file, and now you'll see in this section, the Wheel Tool project has shown up. I can expand that project down and I'll see my G-code file that I had added. And of course, I can select that file and hit print. In addition to just uploading and printing G-code files, Cloud 3D Print can also slice files. So before we do that, let's set up a material profile. And so on the left-hand side, you're going to click on Material Profile. You're going to pick a category. In this case, I'm just going to set up a basic PLA+. And you'll see in here, all of the fields are pre-populated and you cannot edit them. So what you'll find here is that these are mostly just sort of suggested settings. And this material profile can be carried over into the slicer. But it's within the slicer itself that we can really dive into these settings and change all of them for the sliced file. And therefore I can just save that and then head on over to my projects again, where we're going to go back and now upload a new STL model. So not a G-code file. And so up in the Wheel Tool project, you'll see I have model selected, and this is where I can add a model. And then I can navigate to the model I want to add and upload that to the cloud. Once the file is uploaded and stored in this project, it is now associated with this project. And you'll see here that I have G-code files also associated with this project. And if I switch back to the model tab, I can then hit the slice button, and that's going to bring up the slicer. The slicer within Cloud 3D Print should be pretty easy to navigate if you've used any other popular slicer out on the market today. And on the left-hand side, you'll see right now that the default setting is basic settings, and you can switch it over to advanced, where you have a whole lot more parameters that you can work with. And the cool thing here too is that you can switch between the different slicer engines, and so they support Cura and Super Slicer currently. And just a friendly reminder here that at the time of making this video, you can see up in the right-hand corner of the screen, this is still the beta testing version of this software. And so the slicer is something that's going to be constantly under development, and there's going to be more and more functionality built into this thing over time. Continuing with this example, you can see on the right-hand side, I've selected the rotate feature. I've clicked mesh on surface, and what this is going to do, it's going to allow you to select a face, and it's going to put that face down onto the print bed. And then you can use your X, Y, and Z axes to rotate the model to your liking. At the top right-hand corner of the screen, you can also see the material profile that we set up, so that's that PLA+, and then you can of course see the printer that this sliced file is going to be intended for. Back on the left-hand side, all of those parameters for the print are available. You can expand all of those options, and we can play with a few of these right now. And so I'll just modify a few parameters here, like getting rid of the brim. In the material section, you can see now that I can change the nozzle temperature to any value that I want. I'm not limited to what was set in the material properties. And all of the retraction settings, all that stuff is fully customizable in this advanced mode of the slicer. I'm also going to go ahead and turn off things like supports for this model, but of course you have, again, all of these support features built into the slicer. There are the fan and part cooling sections here, the speeds that you can set up, and in the experimental section right now, I think they have a vase mode. And again, all of these slicer settings are things that will be enhanced and upgraded over time, so you can expect to see more functionality in the future. Now, once you're done with all those settings, you can hit slice. That is, of course, going to slice the file, and then you'll see the result. And of course, then you can look at all of the individual layers and see if it is to your liking. And if not, you can hit prepare up on the right-hand side there. And this is going to take you back into the section here where you can change your parameters again. So in this case, I'll change the infill density, reslice, and then look at my layers and you can obviously see that it is now less dense. At the bottom of the screen, there is an option to simulate your print, and so I've hit a 50 times speed. You can hit play, and then you can see how that plays out. Also at the bottom of the screen, you can see the name of the G-code file that will be saved once you hit the Save G-code file button, and so you can edit that name if you so wish. And once you're done, hit Save G-code, and that's going to save that G-code file into the G-code tab section of that project folder, and of course it's now associated with that project. You can choose at this point to share it, download it, or print it directly from there. Otherwise, you can go back into the project section, find it in the G-code section here, and just hit print. And now looking at the G-code files again, you can see the one sliced in Cloud 3D Print has a nice thumbnail associated with it, whereas the other ones not sliced in Cloud 3D Print do not. Now that I covered importing G-code files and STL files and slicing them within Cloud 3D Print, let's print something. I normally like to print directly from the project folder, so I would select the G-code file and hit print. But one other thing I want to show you is controlling the printer prior to a print. And so if you head over to the Raspberry Pi monitor, you'll see the Raspberry Pi that your printer is connected to. You can hit that little button that you want to edit something in the control panel, and then you can say go to control panel. This is going to take you to the control panel for the Raspberry Pi that your printer is connected to, and you can click on the printer itself, and this is going to bring up that printer control interface. I've talked to the guys at Cloud 3D Print to ask them to implement a button directly on the Raspberry Pi monitor page to take you right to the control page. So you sort of skip that roundabout way of getting there, because the only other way to do that is to just go right up and open up a new tab in your browser and type in the IP address or the host name for this device. They did say that that is something that they could do, so I'm hoping to see that in a future release of Cloud 3D Print, because it would just make life a lot easier. But once you're there, all of the familiar controls are available to you, so you can jog all of the axes, you can change the print bed temperature if you want to preheat your print bed or preheat your nozzle, and all of that great stuff, very similar to what you'd find in something like Octoprint if you're familiar with that. I'll just close that tab, and now we're back into the dashboard again, and we can start a print as I had previously mentioned we could, by just going to the project and hitting print on the G-code file. Now what you'll see is something that comes up that says start print. You select the device that you want to print to, and I'm going to press start print. Now specifically showing you this example where I'm printing something from a G-code file that I imported, and so because it was not sliced within Cloud 3D Print, it's not associated directly to that printer, so it's just going to give you a warning and say, hey, you know, potentially this is a mismatched file. This is not the printer that you would slice this for. Do you want to continue? And of course I said yes, because I know that I want to continue and I know that I sliced this for this printer. Then it'll take you directly to the Raspberry Pi monitoring page, where you can see the printer start the print job if you have a webcam connected. And if you have that webcam connected, then you can do things like enable or disable the automatic print failure detection. Clicking on the AI button brings up all of the parameters associated with the print failure detection, so you can toggle it on and off, adjust the severity of when you want to receive alerts, you can adjust the AI sensitivity, and all of that sort of thing. The guys over at Cloud 3D Print have been working hard to train the AI to detect print failures under different lighting conditions, on different print bed surfaces, different filament colors, etc. So I suspect this is going to work quite well, and as time goes on, it's going to get even better. I'm going to disable it for now because I know this printer works very reliably well on the first layer, and I get very few print failures. So the print is going to start, and what you'll also notice are options in there for recording videos, taking screenshots, as well as time lapses. All of those files can be saved right within Cloud 3D Print on the cloud service and associated with that project. Within the rest of the monitoring window, you can see things like the 3D viewer, which shows you a 3D representation of the file you're trying to print, the temperature profiles for the heated bed, as well as the nozzle, and things like generic information about the file that you're printing, such as the file name and duration of the print, etc. Now, unlike Octoprint, where you'd be switching between windows to view your different devices. Here in the Raspberry Pi monitor area, if you had multiple instances of Cloud 3D Print running across different devices, you could switch between the devices and view everything all in one place, which I think is really nice. And then back in your dashboard overview, you could again see all of the print jobs associated with the different groups that you have set up in your administration's profile, and you can look at these statistics over different time periods. If you want to take an even deeper dive into the numbers, you can head over to the Analytics tab, and this is going to show you a lot more information about your projects. If you have things that are overdue, if you're using that feature where you're setting timelines on projects, you can see the number of print jobs, models uploaded, G-code files sliced, material consumption, AI events, and much more. And so again, you can organize this across different dates, across different groups. If you're running a business, this is super useful information. And even if you're just an individual who really likes getting all of their projects right down to a science, this is again fantastic information that you can analyze. I've covered many of the fundamentals of Cloud 3D Print in this video, but on the left-hand side, you'll also see a help section with a whole bunch of video tutorials that covers a wide range of topics relating to Cloud 3D Print. They also have a built-in user manual, frequently asked questions, and you can contact the support team. And if you've been looking at this screen the whole time and you've been wondering if you can customize the dashboard, the colors, or the theme of Cloud 3D Print, this is also possible within the profile section. And so you can change things like your avatar, obviously all of your user information, as well as switching over to night mode and different themed colors for all of the buttons and text. I prefer to run most of my applications in night mode or some sort of darker themed mode because I find it to be a lot easier on my eyes, especially because I stay up all night making these videos for you guys. And so here's just a quick preview of that night mode and some of the different themed colors across a few of the different tabs and screens within Cloud 3D Print. While you guys are checking that out in the background, consider subscribing to my channel so you can keep up with content like this. Also visit the video description down below where you'll find a link to my website, embracemaking.com, where you can find things for sale like filaments, 3D printing accessories, parts, and resources for 3D printing like printer configuration files for the filaments I sell and for the printers that I print with. I just recently launched this website, so it's currently a work in progress, but I'd love to have you guys on board nice and early so you can follow along with its progress and watch it grow.
And so I hope this video was easy enough for you guys to follow along with and see what Cloud 3D Print is all about. Head on over to cloud3dprint.com to sign up for your free account. And at the time of the making of this video, they're also offering free business and professional accounts to obviously incentivize people to sign up and get that feedback on their new software. So definitely take advantage of that while it lasts. I know I'm gonna be switching over a bunch of my printers to Cloud 3D printing software and giving it a try over Octoprint. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.